All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here reading our full Week 9 college football preview and prediction, starting with some midweek games and then moving to Saturday. Tuesday, big-time clash in the CUSA. Liberty, one of the few teams undefeated still in college football. Western Kentucky, kind of really their last shot here to stay in the hunt for the conference crown. So it's a big-time matchup going down, and you look at the matchup, Liberty 5-point favorites. This rushing attack, 274 yards per game. Quentin Cooley, Georgia Tech transfer, 726, 6 touchdowns. Quarterback Caden Salter, nearly 500 yards, another 6 touchdowns. They have a handful of other guys on the roster too that also have over 5 yards per carry. This running game has just been elite this season. Nick, Caden Salter's been great through the air as well, 1,500 yards. Only completing 58%, but has really protected the ball. 3 picks to 16 touchdowns. And the biggest matchup here is, Western Kentucky, 129th nationally against the run, going against one of the top rushing attacks in college football. This just screams bad matchup across the board. Good news for Western Kentucky is that they are facing a bit of a more vulnerable secondary that just got gashed against Middle Tennessee. Overall, it's been a big ball hawking unit, though. Liberty, 15 interceptions. That's, first nationally. 54% completion rate last week against Vadiato and Middle Tennessee. A little bit of concern for me going against Austin Reed and Malachi Corley. Corley's been terrific, 585 yards, 5 scores. And Reed, they love to air this thing out. So plenty of production through the air. Only completed about 59% though, 273 yards per game. This passing attack is certainly, far really regressed from where it was a season ago, and they've really stalled out, the past couple of weeks, especially last week on the road against Jacksonville State. I believe they got shut out in that second half. I'm going to take Liberty to win this one and cover -5 with ease. I just think that on the ground, it's pretty easy here, Nick. They're top 3 nationally in terms of running the ball. And then, Western Kentucky's awful at defending the run, and their passing attack that continues to, be kind of sluggish and inconsistent. They're facing a pass defense that's, very stingy through the air. So I think this is a good matchup for Liberty here, though, win this one pretty handily.
Certainly Liberty's looking to win this game. First year in the Conference USA, and they're undefeated so far. It's 7-0, 5-0 in the conference. In a good spot, their first conference year. Jamie Caldwell, the former Coastal Carolina coach, has taken over for Hugh Freeze, and I think it's been a seamless transition. This team has been very solid. This offense has been producing week in, week out, 487.9 total yards of offense. They scored 42 points against Middle Tennessee last week, a pretty good defense. Western Kentucky, for them, there's a solid offense as well. Reed is a great quarterback. I think the one big key thing to note here is, like you said, Liberty has the most interceptions in FBS, and Reed has 4 picks so far this season. Some of those picks were pretty bad from him, so certainly I think that's a matchup Liberty would like to win the turnover battle in this game on the road. I like Liberty to win this one as well. I think it's going to be a little bit close. I think they'll barely cover. I'm thinking like a 6-7 point win here. I think Western Kentucky can certainly hang with this high-flying offense, but I think when it comes to the end of the day, Liberty will have just too much talent on the ground. The stats on the ground, really do win the battle for me, plus the turnover battle. 274.6 yards per game on the ground for Liberty, only 100 for Western Kentucky. I think the Flames will win this one, move to 8-0. They're certainly in the conversation for the Group of 5 bowl, New Year's 6 bowl bid, and they're certainly in the conversation to win the Conference USA, their first year in the conference.
Now you move to Thursday night. Virginia Tech -3 hosting Syracuse. The Orange. It's been a disappointment for them the last couple of games after starting off 4-0, 3 losses in a row now. A lot of people picked them to cover and even beat Clemson. I was not one of them. I was on the side of the Tigers. 31-14 victory there. And then the last couple of weeks, 33-point L to North Carolina, 38 to Florida State, both road games. And, their offense was completely stifled, while the defense was absolutely grinded down on 535 against the Noles. 644 on nearly 100 plays for North Carolina. That's just, abusing this defense, really. And, Virginia Tech, they've really found something in Kyron Drones. All of a sudden on offense, they weren't all that great against FSU. Only really scored 10 points because they had a kick return touchdown as well. But in the games after and before, Pittsburgh, they were able to put up 38, 30 against Wake Forest. And, Drones has been playing very well in those ball games after, a sluggish start to the year on offense for this team, led by Grant Wells. Obviously, Ollie Jennings being out certainly hasn't helped the passing attack. But Jalen Lane, he's remained healthy. 341 yards, 16 yards per catch. He's been reliable. Daquan Felton, Stephen Gosnell, these guys have made some really good plays as well. Bashal Tutton at running back, one of those transfers they picked up. Hasn't been, the greatest on the ground, but Drones, 344 and 4 touchdowns. And he recently just got the keys to the offense. So he's really been able to, pick things up on the ground for them. Already 3 games of over 70-plus rushing. And, I think Virginia Tech, they're going to win this game outright, and they're going to go ahead and cover that spread as well. I just think they've certainly found something here. The VT defense, they also played well in those 2 wins. They weren't the worst against Florida State, even though on the ground, gave up 282 yards, plenty of big games on the edge. And Syracuse is certainly going to look to attack that. They're looking to bounce back. They're capable. Quinn Allen, 7 touchdowns, 500-plus yards. Garrett Schrader, we know what he can do on the ground, 358 and 6 touchdowns. His passing attack, I think, is much improved compared to last year. Almost 200 yards passing as a team, or at least for Schrader, that is. And they've been really spreading it out. Guys like Donovan Brown, Damian Alford, Yamari Hatcher, they've really stepped up in the absence of Aronde Gadsden. I just think the lack of size up front for Syracuse is going to allow the Virginia Tech offense to have some nice balance here. And I think the Orange offense themselves, they've been, again, stifled a little bit the past 2 weeks. Completely different opponent here, but the Hokies, they've been stepping up a little bit more. Very capable on this side of the ball under Brent Pry, Antoine Powell-Ryland leading the way on the defensive line. They got plenty of other guys who can make things up as well. Rel Pollard, for example, like their linebacker Alan Tisdale. Some nice players on this defense for Virginia Tech. I think this is going to be a nice Thursday night showdown in the ACC, but I'm going to take -3 Virginia Tech to continue to stay a little bit hot against some of these inferior opponents.
I like Syracuse to win this one outright. They've had a tough stretch here playing Florida State, UNC, and Clemson with back-to-back road games. They looked really good against Army. They looked really good against Purdue, beating Purdue on the road. West Lafayette's a tough place to play. The offense this year has been good. Obviously, the last couple weeks against those better opponents, not great, right? 3 points, 7 points, 14 points, not ideal, but 400 yards of total offense, 232 through the air, and 167 on the ground. Pretty good numbers, if you ask me. I like those numbers. Garrett Schrader looks better. The turnovers are still a problem. The 5 interceptions certainly worries me, but LaQuint Allen has been very good on the ground, 5'11" and 7 scores. I like to see him be involved. This Hokie defense on the ground is giving up 172 per game. I certainly can see them, the Syracuse Orange, winning the battle on the ground and getting some nice big chunk plays out of Allen. I also like some of the wide receiving room they have. If Virginia Tech's going to win this game, they got to attack through the air. Syracuse has been very bad against the pass defense, 255.7 given up per game this season, 380 total yards of offense. I think it's going to be close. I'm going to take Syracuse on the road. They have a very favorable schedule coming up for Dino Babers and company as they try to get towards bowl eligibility. They host Boston College and Pitt in back-to-back weeks, then travel to Georgia Tech and host Wake Forest. So certainly can find themselves in a good position to get to a bowl game based off that schedule. I like Syracuse to win this one, I think, on Thursday night. They're going to come in here and win this one on the road based off a good balanced attack on the ground, attacking the defense for Virginia Tech and trying to put some points on the board early.
Looking to Statesboro, Georgia State, Georgia Southern. This was an interesting game a season ago. Georgia State won 41-33 up north, and then they come down a little bit more south. And pretty much a pick 'em at this moment in time. We're looking at the lines. Georgia State offense, I like what they have here, but sometimes this balance is certainly, it's never really wavered, but it certainly hasn't been as efficient this season. Against Troy, they put up 7 points, less than 300 yards, exploded against a good Marshall defense, back down to normalcy on the road to Louisiana Lafayette, only 343. This is a good offense, though. I like what they have, and I think the production should be more consistent. Darian Granger knocking on the door, 70% comp rate, 233 yards per game as a passer, 10 touchdowns there, another 368 and 5 scores on the ground. He's got the phenomenal back Marcus Carroll, 10 touchdowns, 852 yards. This is a nice dynamic offense, has some nice balance. Robert Lewis is a speedy pass catcher. Talik Williams as well. I even like Jakari Carter. That trio of pass catchers is an interesting unit. And Carroll, of course, is dangerous as a receiver. Georgia Southern, though, this defense, they're top 80 nationally in total defense. Last year, they were one of the nation's worst. They've done tremendous improvements on this side of the ball, led by elite linebacker Marquise Watson-Trent. They've been getting good production from, most guys on this defense, a lot of young players as well. Look at guys like Isaac Walker, Justin Rhodes. They're really stepping up on the defensive line. It certainly allowed them to be a little bit more sturdy against the run. Only 26 yards rushing allowed the ULM. James Madison really had their number, but they still only give them 125 on the ground there. So I think this is a much improved defense, especially against the run, Nick. They were awful last year. Give up 3,000 yards rushing on the ground. That is just horrendous. And they still were able to, almost knock off the Panthers. And you look at the Georgia Southern offense, it certainly regressed a little bit. Davis Brin, 11 interceptions. The Tulsa transfer is not great. Still north of 300 yards a contest and 14 touchdowns. And, Jalen White coming off a big performance as well against ULM. And then they have a nice duo of receivers in Caleb Hood and Derwin Burgess, 2 veterans there. And then the Syracuse transfer, Anthony Quealy, has been a nice slot option for them. I'm going to take Georgia Southern outright in this one. Rowdy crowd down there in Statesboro in a rivalry game. And I think as long as Brent can protect the ball, which is certainly iffy week to week, then they'll be able to win this game pretty handily because I think this defense will play with some energy against a balanced, inconsistent attack. This should be a great game all around for 4 quarters, though.
I'm taking Georgia Southern as well. I think this is a fun and rivalry game on a Thursday. Good matchup here. Two schools that do not like each other in the state of Georgia. Two important schools in the state of Georgia outside the University of Georgia and Georgia Tech. I like the matchup here. I like the battle a lot. Georgia Southern, I think they're a solid program right now. They're trending in the right direction. I like what they're doing. Their defense is a lot better this year. 373 allowed per game on the ground. Like you said, total night and day. The 121 allowed on the ground per game is a very impressive turnaround for this team. They were giving up so much yards on the ground last year. They've really turned it around. Brin's turnovers are certainly a concern, but when he's not turning the ball over, the 14 touchdowns and 2,100 yards passing are impressive numbers. I think that Georgia State's just going to struggle to keep up with this Georgia Southern offense. They're a better offense, and they're especially a better offense, passing 318 yards per game through the air. Very good numbers from Georgia Southern. I expect a high-scoring affair here, but I like the Eagles to win this one as well on Thursday night. A fun matchup, certainly worth tuning. I think the slate on Thursday is fantastic with Syracuse Tech and then Georgia State and Georgia Southern. You can change between those two games and bounce back and forth. I think those are two very good matchups to watch on Thursday.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Moving to Saturday, Week 9 is probably the last bad week in CFB. Kind of a primer for a big Week 10. Florida State, Wake Forest, they're going to get a prime time slot here on ABC. 20-point line in favor of FSU. This Wake Forest team has been really disappointing on offense. We thought they'd be a lot better with the veterans they have at receiver, especially guys like Jamal Banks and Taylor Morin. Mason Griffiths at quarterback. And they've just not been good. 59% comp rate as a team, 10 touchdowns, 8 picks, only 218 yards per game passing. It's just been awful through the air, Nick, and that's really going to be your best opportunity to attack Florida State. The Noles, they certainly haven't been the greatest at defending the run. They haven't been as good as we thought they would be. But they're still loaded up front. Guys like Jared Verse, Joshua Farmer's massive, Patrick Payton. You look at hard-hitting linebackers and Kalen DeLoach, DJ Lundy, of course, the leading tacklers, and then Tatum Bethune as well. I don't think the secondary is going to be much tested here. I definitely think, the safety group can be exposed from time to time. These are some physical corners that are going to make plays. So I don't think this passing attack will do much. They're going to have to try and run the ball. And, they've been all right at doing that, I guess, in about 150 yards per contest. I like Desmond Claiborne. Justice Ellison hasn't found the end zone once this year. This offense is just a lot worse than we thought it would be. And then the defense, I think they've certainly been holding their own. And that's what they're going to have to do is, play hard defense in this game. But they've allowed, 300-plus passing in back-to-back weeks against Pittsburgh and Virginia Tech, two teams that really struggled on offense this year. They did well against Clemson. Clemson's kind of a joke at this point, though. 380 allowed total against Georgia Tech. 3 straight losses there, and they picked up a win over Pittsburgh last week. So I think the Wake Forest defense, they're certainly playing tough. They're not doing the greatest, though. Seems like they're kind of getting worse to worse on a week-to-week basis. But they've got good ball players. Guys like Jasheen Davis, Kevin Pointer, veterans on the defensive line. This is what unit we talked about coming into the season, how good they were up front. That was really about it, though. The secondary has talented players as well, but they still get burned. Jacob Roberts, of course, that linebacker, their leading tackler. I'm going to take Florida State to cover in this one. I just don't think they'll have enough offense. I think the best part of their defense is kind of at a disadvantage here against a strong, physical Florida State run game. I'll take the Noles to cover, even though in games like this, kind of like the Boston College game, big number, and they failed to deliver big time.
I'm taking the Noles to cover as well, but I certainly think if you're going to be betting on this game, you should be probably a little careful thinking about this one because, like you said, against Boston College, they were also, pretty heavy favorites, 20-plus points, and they let down in that game on the road. Another similar situation, playing an inferior opponent on the road early in the day. I think it certainly is. If you want to throw a gamble out here, I think Wake Forest to cover is certainly something you can look at if you're going to take a risk on Saturday. The 20 points is an interesting number. This Florida State team, they should easily win this game on paper, but obviously Wake Forest has a pretty strong defense and they fight. They get into dog fights. Last couple of weeks, 17 points they gave up against Pitt, gave up against 30 against Virginia Tech and Georgia Tech. They gave up 17 against Clemson. So they're hit or miss week in, week out. They're a solid unit overall. They're good against the run on the ground, and I like to see if Trey Benson can kind of beat that and find a way to get through that. Jordan Travis, for his part, has been perfect for this Florida State offense. This Wake Forest defense is not great in the secondary. They get picked apart pretty easily. Like you said, they struggled against Pitt and Virginia Tech, two teams that cannot throw the ball quite like Jordan Travis and his plethora of weapons can. I like Florida State to win this one. I think Florida State, again, I keep saying it every single week, but they're right where they want to be. They're in a good spot. Just keep winning. That's all they got to do at this point. They know the script. Just keep winning. They should find themselves easily in the college football playoff.
Looking to Lawrence, Kansas hosting Oklahoma, 10-point line in favor of the Sooners. Interesting game all of a sudden. Jason Bean's been the quarterback for the past couple of games with Daniels being out. I think it was a back injury. Bean's a plenty capable quarterback, though. And I said that when Daniels even went down, and he proved it against Oklahoma State in a losing effort, 4-10 and 5 touchdowns through the air. Good runner as well with some speed. They really haven't uncorked him on that area, though. The running game, Devin Neal, Daniel Highshaw, combined 12 touchdowns, over 1,000 yards, 212 on the ground for this offense. They've really found something here. Lance Leopold, we got it going. the talent at receiver isn't all that great, but, Quentin Skinner stepping up, that's been big for them, while Luke Grimes, Lawrence Arnold continue to be reliable pass catchers. Production through the receiving core, though, really isn't all that great this season, going against Oklahoma defense that, really allowed some big plays against UCF. We picked them to cover, of course, the Knights, but I didn't think they would be able to really tee off like they did, where they had, almost 400 yards, but it was really explosive plays that reigned the day. And that's been a problem for Oklahoma in the secondary. They still have been really good, though. 12 interceptions, Billy Bowman, Gentry Williams. These guys are in a much better position here. I think the lack of talent for Kansas and the receiving core is certainly going to show up and be evident here. And then their defense is just abysmal. Like you figured it would be, but they really have not been great at all. 35 points per game last year, 27 now. I mean, that's certainly an improvement, right? But against these tougher opponents, it certainly hasn't really showed up that much. You have 554 against Oklahoma State, 661 against Texas. That's just awful after a good first month of the year for the most part. The Kansas defense is really falling apart. Had a good game against UCF. Of course, that was a backup quarterback. They still have plenty of weapons they're able to shut down. So you're going to go for some points there. I just think, Oklahoma, even with the lack of an explosive running game, I think Dylan Gabriel's playing very good football right now. 2,100 yards this year, 19 touchdowns. Guys like Jaleel Farouk, Andre Anthony, and Nick Anderson, who has 8 touchdowns this year. They're going to be throwing it all over the place on Kansas. I'm going to pick them to cover here by at least 2 touchdowns. I think Kansas will look to hang into this game for a good bit. I just don't see them covering at the end, Nick. I think the defense will cause them some downfalls in that game against Texas, shows why.
Oklahoma, predictably had that slip up, a scare against UCF at home. You and I both saw that from a mile away. UCF really shot themselves in the foot late in the game and cost themselves that one. Oklahoma skates by. Another tough challenge this week on the road at Kansas. The Kansas team is a pretty good team despite losing their starting quarterback, Daniels. Like I said, Bean's a pretty reliable guy that came in there and stepped in nearly 1,000 yards passing and 9 scores for him. I like Oklahoma to win this one as well and cover the spread. I think they'll pull away late. I think they just have too much talent on offense at this point. And the defense, I think the defenses are pretty on par between these two teams. They're very similar. Kansas giving up a little more yards per game, a little more, especially on the ground. Oklahoma has not been great on the ground, so I think it certainly neutralizes that weakness for Kansas because Oklahoma will not be able to take advantage of that. But I like the Sooners to win this game and cover the spread. The Sooners are playing pretty good football. They've won the last couple games, a big test against Texas 2 weeks ago, and now they're kind of coasting through this conference play. The schedule is not very tough for them after this Kansas game. The schedule gets very easy. They kind of control their own destiny and the pathway they want to go. Dylan Gabriel looks dialed in, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Farouk looks pretty good as well, nearly 450 and 2 scores for him, plus some other receivers being involved, 328.6 yards per game through the air. I like Oklahoma to win this one by about 2 scores. Should be an interesting matchup closer in the first half, but Oklahoma's going to pull away late.
Yeah, looking at UCF now hosting West Virginia. Pretty lofty line here, 7 in favor of the Knights. Can't really understand why. John Ross Plumlee, though, he's good, 248, 2 touchdowns, and in his return, had a rushing touchdown as well, only -4 yards. Doesn't look like his legs are going to be much of a factor. At least that's what you saw against Oklahoma. I think John Ross Plumlee's a phenomenal athlete, though, and everyone knows that. His mobility seems a little hampered, though. Javon Baker, Kobe Hudson, R.J. Harvey at running back. This is a phenomenal supporting cast, right? But this is a West Virginia defense. Certainly got exposed a little bit last week at home against Ali Gordon. They had 491 yards in that game. But before that, they've been playing pretty solid defense. They lost a tough one at Houston on a Hail Mary. Defense played very good in that game throughout. But they have allowed 7 yards per play in each of the last 2 games. Held it very well against TCU and Texas Tech. Dominated Pittsburgh. I mean, this is a team playing with some heart and some physicality. They certainly, Neil Brown, his last go here. Yeah, I think he kind of saved his job at this point. Tyron Bradley, Mike Lockhart up front has been great. Lee Kapogba at linebacker, and Jared Bartlett, another veteran, is phenomenal for them. And the addition of Beanie Bishop's been great as well in the secondary. I think Garrett Green, though, this is a player that I enjoy watching. He only completed about 52%. This passing attack is pretty battle tested for the most part. Devin Carter, he's been a good possession pass catcher for them. Hudson Clement's been a guy downfield who's really emerged as a freshman. Cole Taylor as a tight end as well. This isn't the most talented receiving core by any means. But I think this is a great ground game led by C.J. Donaldson, 191 on the ground. Him and Green, nice little tandem there. UCF, this is a defense that certainly, is coming off, a bit of weaker performances here. 4-game losing streak for them, Nick. I think West Virginia is going to probably cover this one. I'm going to go ahead and pick them to win outright. I don't understand why they're 7-point underdogs, especially with a team that is, again, yet to pick up their first conference win. And now they have to host a Mountaineers team. It's going to be fired up after 2 kind of heartbreaking losses here. It is a road game. Bounce house, though, in the middle of the afternoon is not something I'm too worried about.
I'm going to have to disagree with you here. I think West Virginia is going to lose this game. I'm a little concerned that they're going back to old habits. The old Neil Brown is showing himself with some poor coaching decisions at Houston and at home to Oklahoma State. some bad miscues on special teams against Oklahoma State certainly cost the Mountaineers, who could have won that game. UCF, they want to get a conference win here. They're going to be fired up, in my opinion. They've lost 4 in a row, but they fought really hard against Oklahoma. We figured they'd give Oklahoma a game with John Rice Plumlee back under center. My favorite player in college football, outside of the place of the university that I support, I think he's just a talented, incredible athlete. And now that he's at full health, you really saw what he was able to do, having a pretty good game against Oklahoma. I like to see him continue to do that. This night's offense, nearly 500 yards of total offense per game. The defense is not great, but they're getting better over time. Yes, they only gave up 31 points, but they gave up 51 to Kansas. They're getting better overall. I think Gus Malzahn and company want to get that first conference win at home. The crowd hopefully will be loud, like you said, early in the morning. Maybe they won't be. It's going to be close with the spread. I think 7 is a lofty line. I think they can certainly cover it by a very small amount, or West Virginia's going to cover it barely at the end, because I do like C.J. Donaldson on the ground. I do like Garrett Green at quarterback for West Virginia. Plus, that defense is getting better over time. But the 223 passing yards allowed for the Mountaineers is a concerning number against John Rice Plumlee and company, who has a very nice arsenal of weapons to throw to. I like UCF to win this game, get their first conference win in Big 12 play. Gus Malzahn could certainly use this win. I think some people are getting a little concerned about their performances as of late, especially the collapse against Baylor. Want to get this win and try to move toward potentially being bowl eligible.
Yeah, this run defense for UCF has just been a disaster in this conference, though. 399 they allowed against Kansas, for example, just the other week. So I'm going to take West Virginia right in this contest. Looking at South Carolina, Texas A&M. Let's do a kind of a quick pick here. It's just a bad matchup for them. -14 for A&M. South Carolina, we already know what the issues are. The offensive line's poor. Secondary's not good. Very talented group for Texas A&M. On both sides of the ball, they can exploit you. You know, with Nice Smith, Evan Stewart, Noah Thomas. I got some guys that are going to really win downfield. And the defensive line's absolutely loaded. I'm not sure what Walter Nolan's status is, but guys like Edrin Cooper at linebacker, Shamar Turner, Fadil Diggs. I mean, this defensive line, McKinley Jackson as well, has really stepped up this year. Really developed in nice areas. They weren't all that great against Tennessee against the run like I thought they would be, but this defense is great. I mean, they've only had over 450 yards once. That was against Miami. They've been really good in SEC play. I think they're going to dominate SC here. Hard to pick that because A&M, they're also a bunch of disappointments themselves. But they've shown at times this year where they can really play some very sound football. I think Gamecocks here are going to be at a big disadvantage. Aggies going to win this one big.
I think this is certainly going to be a big opportunity for A&M to get a ton of points here. South Carolina, absolute free fall. This defense giving up 446.7 yards per game of total defense. That's just an atrocious number. 304 yards per game allowed through the air. They're in free fall mode. They gave up 41 to Tennessee, 41 to Florida, 34 to Mizzou, and they gave up 30 to Mississippi State in a win. This team has fallen apart. They're totally night and day from the team that competed with Georgia early in the season. Shane Beamer is not coaching a very good team right now. He needs to control himself. The antics on the sidelines, him breaking his foot after the loss to Florida, not a very good thing you want to see. A&M, for their part, yeah, they looked bad the last 2 games against Alabama and Tennessee, but they're still a very good ball club overall who has some really solid pieces on offense, 400 yards total offense. I think you got to take A&M with the spread here, -14. Seems like free money to me. They're going to blow South Carolina at home. Should be a raucous crowd at Kyle Field like always. Tough matchup with the Gamecocks. They continue to be in free fall. We're going to have to dissect this team in the offseason because I have a lot of question marks about what's going on in Columbia.
Looking at the best part of Week 9 is going to be the mid-afternoon slate. We did previews and predictions in depth on the top 2 matchups, so we'll keep it a little quick. Georgia, Florida. Gators to cover here, 14.5-point line. Georgia, obviously, first game, I think, ever without Brock Bowers. Carson Beck's been playing really good football, but we're all interested to see how they will do without that big asset there that can do everything for you. The run game, led by Dejon Edwards, Kendall Milton, very good this year. They don't seem to be as physically dominant, though, as in years past. Only $172 on the ground, going against the Florida run defense that they're still trying to get that Kentucky game out of their heads. And I think they're much better than that. They proved that against Utah, a very sturdy effort. Shamar James, Scooby Williams in the middle, they're going to have to be very good and physical. Princely Umanelli, not going to have many opportunities, I think, to win as a pass rusher, so he's having to be great against the run. Guys like TJ Searcy, Tariq Sapp, Desmond Watson. I mean, they got players and they got some nice depth. Jamari Lyons as well. I think they've really recruited this position hard for games like this. I think they have some nice size and ability there. So I think they're going to do a good job against this Georgia, attack on the ground. Graham Mertz has to continue to be efficient. 76% comp rate, 271 through the air. Ricky Pearsall has been amazing. Eugene Watson as a freshman, figured he would get involved. Arliss Boardingham, another freshman at tight end. Khalil Jackson's had a handful of receptions. They got different guys they're going to have to spread it out to. The running game hasn't been as great. It's probably going to struggle here. Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne, though, they can change the game. And I think they'll have some good plays that keeps drives going, maybe even finish it off in the end zone. So I think Florida's going to cover it in this game. I think they're playing much better. Down 10 late against South Carolina on the road. They came back and won that one. It shows that this team believes in Billy Napier. That's, kind of speaks volumes to the culture going on right now. 2 wins in a row for this team. They already beat Tennessee, which I did predict earlier on in the year. I think they're going to cover in this game, Nick. I'd be disappointed if the Gators got blown out. Yes, Georgia is good, but they've had some of their struggles as well. But I think the Gators, they have something cooking here. I think they have some nice favorable matchups that, are not going to be too bad for them.
I like Florida to cover as well. I think this is a great opportunity for them to make this game close. Billy Napier, his seat has cooled off absolutely this season. I mean, people saying that he was on the hot seat, I thought that was foolish, but that just kind of shows what the culture is of that fan base in Gainesville. They expect results immediately, but at 5-2 right now, haven't beat Tennessee, as well as got some other SEC wins on the boat. I think you're happier with Florida fan right now. This team will certainly be in a bowl game, a mid-tier bowl game, and continue to build. This team is looking a lot better on offense than any of us could imagine. Graham Mertz is having a great season compared to what you thought. Ricky Pearsall is one of the most underrated wide receivers in the country, if not the most underrated college football receiver in the country. Very talented piece. I like the running game to have a good day against the front seven for Georgia. Look a little weak at times. They're still very good, but they're not quite the Georgia standard of the last couple of seasons. Without Brock Bowers, there's a ton of question marks for me. What will this offense look like? What will they be able to draw up? They still are getting used to their new offensive coordinator after Todd Monken left, so certainly tough with Mike Bobo running the strings. I think they're still kind of adjusting, and Bowers bailed them out against Auburn. They probably would have lost that game if he was not playing for them. No Brock Bowers means this game should be closer on paper. It's a good rivalry game, a neutral site in Jacksonville. Should be a pretty fun crowd. The Florida fans will be fired up. They think they have an opportunity to compete and win this game outright potentially. I like this one to be a close one. Georgia pull away late to win the game, probably by 10 points, something like that. But I certainly think that they will cover the spread. Florida, that is, 14.5. 2 scores and a lot of points for me.
Looking at Oregon, Utah. Utes still in the hunt after a big win on the road in Southern Cal. This defense is phenomenal, especially against the run. This is a phenomenal defensive line led by Jonah Ellis, Keanu Tavaza, defensive tackle Logan Fano. They've been getting healthier up front. Evan Fillinger, Connor O'Toole coming back. That's big news for this defense. They've been really good. Oregon, though, this offense has just been phenomenal. 200-plus passing, 200-plus rushing in 5 consecutive games. Bo Nix is really clicking with this, deep receiving room, 78% comp rate, 19 touchdowns, only 1 pick. Tez Johnson's great in the slot. Troy Franklin's been phenomenal downfield. This is certainly the biggest weakness for Utah is their secondary. Obviously on the offense, CINCY-OKST, leading tackler at safety. He's been just a phenomenal asset last 2 games as a running back and as a pass catcher. Quentin Jackson's healthy. This is a physical run game, but Oregon, they're certainly built to defend the run a lot better than USC and their moron defensive coordinator, Jordan Birch, Brandon Dorlus. These are good assets for them. The pass rush isn't all that deep, and the productivity is certainly up from last year. But I don't think Utah's really going to be put in too many situations maybe for them to tee up. I guess I would be wrong because I think there's going to be a lot of, second and third and longs here. I think it's going to be back to one-dimensional, though, for Utah. Obviously, they had a good game against USC, against a moron defensive coordinator. But Buxton, Bryson Barnes, that is, showcased some nice heart and grit. But this has still been a problem this year. This passing attack has not been good one bit. The contingency plan for Cam Rising going down certainly was not in place one bit. 162 yards per game as a team through the air. They have guys that can burn you on Money Parks, Devon Veely, Mikey Matthews. But I like the secondary led by Tasheem Johnson and Evan Williams in the back end for Oregon to step up, not allow any big plays. And I think they'll showcase some physicality against the run. And I think that the Ducks will cover -4 with ease. I think they win this one by double figures, which is hard to do in Salt Lake City. But I love this Oregon team. And, Dan Lanning, he left a lot of points on the board when he decided to go for it against Washington, a game they probably should have won. So that's a pretty good loss there on the road to Seattle. I think they're not going to make the same mistake here. Again, a one-dimensional offense for Utah is probably not going to be enough to take down the Ducks' high-flying attack.
A matchup like this where one team has such a high-power offense, the other team has such a powerful defense, and the defense and the offense on the other side are a little less unbalanced. I'm going to take the team with the best offense every single time. I like Oregon a ton here. I'm excited to see what Bo Nix can do. He's having a great season, 2,100 yards, 19 touchdowns, 1 interception. He looks dialed in, locked in, 75% completion percentage roughly as well. He's a very good quarterback, a veteran quarterback, 326 yards per game through the air. Bucky Irving looks good as well, 226 on the ground, 553 total offense for Oregon. I like the Ducks in this one. Utah's defense is obviously no joke, and they've kept them into games despite having no quarterback play really at all. Once Cam Rising was listed out for the season, it really has seemed to cost this team greatly. If they had Cam Rising, they would certainly be unbeaten, in my opinion, and really in the driver's seat for the Pac-12. But they find themselves in a tough spot with 1 loss, thanks to having no real passing attack with Brent Kuthi out as well. They have the weapons, they just don't have anyone to get it to them. I like Oregon to win this game. I think they'll cover the spread as well, but probably by a significant amount. I like to see them win by double digits on the road, which is very rare. Salt Lake City is a tough place to play. Rice-Eccles Stadium has been fantastic with Kyle Whittingham at the helm. I just like Oregon in this one. I think this offense is just too high flying, and Utah will be unable to keep the pace with them and find themselves creating turnovers and making mistakes.
Looking at Duke and Louisville ranked matchup in the ACC, bit of an eliminator here. I think Jack Plummer, his struggles in this offense have been kind of shocking. 271 a game is a pretty good average, but I certainly expected them to be at a higher percent completion rating. 8 interceptions is pretty ridiculous, especially for his experience in the scheme. And I think they have a lot of talent led by Jamari Thrash at wide receiver, Kevin Coleman, Jimmy Callaway, Chris Bell. They have some great speed. Jordan, his usage has been, even better than expected. He's delivered 661 and 8 touchdowns for the scheme. As running back is great. I think that's some nice ideal balance. But Plummer, he's just been turning it over. The efficiency downfield, it hasn't been consistency or all that pretty, especially with some of the mistakes Plummer's been making. Now you turn around and face a great Blue Devils secondary led by Brandon Johnson, Chandler Rivers. This is a very good unit for them. They're pretty sturdy up front as well, led by Anais Pebbles, RJ Oben, and of course Dwayne Carter. This is a really good defense for Duke. Obviously Riley Leonard, we don't know if he's going to play or not. And his stats weren't all that great. He was clearly still hobbled against Florida State. But his impact was certainly felt. You could tell, when it comes to converting third downs and just overall presence and leadership, yards and whatnot go out the window. They had a chance to go up, 2 scores before he got his ankle re-aggravated, put the backup in, and Henry Beelan went forward on 4th down. Didn't get it, and they didn't score again. Leonard tried to come back in the game, which I think is encouraging. Elko would not let him do it. I'm going to go with the impression that he's going to play in this game. But that said, I think they're going to win this game outright. Secondary's going to shut down this inconsistent passing attack. I think the Duke, balance here, because they ran the ball much better than expected against FSU, led by Jordan Waters, Jaquez Moritz, nice runs as well. Almost 200 yards rushing against FSU. Very impressive mark there. I think Duke's going to win this game. If Leonard doesn't play, probably not, because I don't think that Beelan's good. They have good talent on offense, right? But they certainly don't have it to the point where a backup can come in and really thrive. So I think Duke will win if Leonard plays. If not, it's going to be in the air, most certainly. This Louisville defense has had some issues this year at times, especially last week, or the last game against Pittsburgh, where they allowed almost 5 yards per play. The defense has been much better for Louisville, right, Nick? But I think the balance here, led by Leonard, is going to be too much. Duke outright.
I think if Leonard doesn't play, which I'm going to err on the side of caution, assume that he doesn't play, I'm going to pick the Cardinals here. Yes, Plummer's been disappointing on offense. 8 interceptions is poor, 1,900 yards passing. You expected more in this air raid system. He looks uncomfortable. It's kind of weird. I thought he would really hit the ground running. They looked very poor against Pitt, had some bad mistakes on the road. That was their first loss of the season. They fall in the 6-1. I do like the Cardinals in this game, assuming that Leonard is not playing. That's the assumption I'm going to operate under at this moment in time until we know any further. I'm going to pick the Cardinals here. I'm going to err on the safe side. I think they just have too much talent compared to Duke, who's going to have to struggle plugging in Belvin, who is not a bad quarterback, but I just think that when you plug in a quarterback like that on the road, a tough environment at Cardinals Stadium, it should be pretty loud, sellout crowd. I'm going to take the home team here. I think it'll be close. I think Duke will be able to hang around, certainly for most of the game. But I think this Cardinal offense, which is just a little bit better, and the defenses are very balanced. I think the Cardinals offense is a little bit more, for me, a little more punch right now. It's going to get the slowly get the win done and cover the spread as well. I'm looking at 4 points. I think they'll cover it probably by a touchdown, something like that. This should be a very interesting matchup, though, at 3:30. These are two teams in the ACC that are having very good seasons. Two programs that have not been great for a while. They've bounced back here and look to be in a good position. I like the Cards to win this one, though, at home.
Looking at BYU traveling to take on Texas. Picked up a win over Tech last week at home. This team certainly has been interesting, because before that they got hammered by TCU 44-11. They also lost to Kansas on the road earlier this year. Now, this is an offense led by Keaton Slovis. Also has been pretty inconsistent. 56% comp rate. Haven't really utilized the weapons as expected. Less than 230 yards passing last 3 games. And the only game this year they really succeeded in was against an FCS opponent through the air. And this is a lot of talent in the receiving core. I like Isaac Rex at tight end. Chase Roberts is great. Darius Lassiter's been a pleasant surprise. BYU coming in this game, the biggest thing we're really talking about is Malik Murphy getting the start. Quinn Ewers injured. Obviously he's going to get the nod over Arch Manning. I think they're still trying to redshirt. It's going to be a Jonathan Brooks, CJ Baxter show. 8 touchdowns combined, over 1,000 yards for these guys. Brooks has been one of the nation's top running backs. And the receiving core is still also very good. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders as well. Very deep receiving room here. Plenty of weapons for Murphy to deal with. I don't think Sarkisian, an experienced play caller, is going to put his quarterback in too many tough decisions or spots. BYU run defense has been, sound the last 2 weeks, but they've also gotten hammered against, Kansas and Cincinnati. So I don't know what version we're going to see of BYU. Probably going to get ran down on against the physical Texas offensive line. Guys like Tyler Beatty, Ben Bywater, they're going to have to be ready. Max Tooley as well. They're going to have to be prepared to play in this game. Actually, I think Bywater's still hurt, but regardless, they still got guys, on this defense that can step up and play good football. I'm going to pick BYU to cover. I just think they're going to try to play a conservative approach for Texas, and I think BYU will have some success on defense and slowing that down. I think it's like 17.5. I'll go ahead and take a stab at the Cougars. Had the Cougars last week in Houston, and they played great against Texas. They probably should have won that game. Awful spot at the end of that contest. Certainly showcased some nice defensive struggles we really didn't expect through the air by Texas's defense. So we'll see what happens. I'm going to take the Cougars to cover. But we'll see what happens here with no Quinn Ewers, Nick.
I'm also going to take BYU to cover. No Quinn Ewers certainly is an issue for Texas. I think Sark's going to baby in the quarterback that's going to start and take good care of that quarterback. But overall, I think it is tough when you have to plug in and replace a guy like Ewers, who's been having a phenomenal season, all things considered, nearly 2,000 yards passing, 13 touchdowns. This Texas offense has been humming and hawing. Even in their one loss, they scored 30 points. They look very good. BYU, I liked them a lot against Texas Tech, and they ended up winning that game. They were dogs in that game. They won it outright. Keaton Slovis has been completely inconsistent. Has been definitely struggling to adjust, but this team is good. They're really weird up and down. They beat Arkansas one week, who are not very good for their own right. Then they lose to Kansas. They beat Cincinnati, lose to TCU, beat Texas Tech. They're all over the place. I like them to be competitive in this one. 79 yards per game on the ground is a number that really concerns me for BYU. They cannot run the ball at all. They really seem to have no rhythm on the ground. And this is not a good Texas team against the run. At times, they've looked better as of late. They did not look good in some of their games earlier in the season. So certainly they need to figure out if they can plug in a bad BYU rushing attack and stifle the Cougars. This offense for Texas is very good, 468 total offense. How are they going to look with a new signal caller? That's certainly the question mark. But 17.5 is a very lofty spread. They've struggled to cover other lofty spreads in the past. They barely covered against Rice and Wyoming. So I think certainly you'll want to take BYU in this one. But I think Texas does win it outright with that one loss. Texas is in a very interesting spot. They had the one loss to Oklahoma. They beat Alabama on the road. Where does Texas end up when this all shakes out? They got to continue to run the table here and get that extra matchup with Oklahoma to try and see if they can figure something out.
Yeah, Rice did cover in that season opener. Looking at the nightcap, Tennessee and Kentucky -4 in favor of the Vols. Joe Milton and Squirrel White had a great connection early on in that game. Second half, the offense was nowhere to be found, but Milton, showing his deep ball and his accuracy. He was on, playing at a high level in that first half. Didn't last, but that Alabama defense is very good. Completely shut down this rushing attack that's phenomenal by Tennessee. They got the 300 monster of Wright, Small, and Sampson. Going against the Kentucky team that certainly, has, they got blown out against Georgia. Ray Davis has been phenomenal for them running the ball. They ended up losing to Missouri as well at home. This is a team that I expected to be much better this season, coming off 2 in a row. Now they got to play Tennessee. Devin Leary's been awful, less than 200 yards, 7 picks, 54% comp rate. Week after week, he says, I got to play better. Well, he's just never going to, it doesn't seem. He certainly has regressed since his NC State days. I'm kind of sick of him saying he's going to play better, and he just continues to overshoot. Open receivers like Marion Brown, Dane Key, Tavion Robinson, nice group here. Tennessee's defense, though, I think the offense will showcase some nice balance. Kentucky has the abilities to slow down the run, led by Deion Walker, a massive player in the middle. Josiah Hayes, J.J. Weaver, love Trevin Wallace at linebacker. I mean, this is certainly a capable defense, right? But they got absolutely destroyed against Georgia, 600 yards there. Missouri's offense wasn't all that great, but overall as a team performance, it was not very good. I'm going to pick Tennessee here to win this one by more than the line indicates. I think they'll win it by at least 10 points going on the road. It's going to be difficult. I just think that led by James Pierce, this Tennessee defense, it's a good unit. I think it's a very good defense here. Obviously, you got a phenomenal linebacker, Aaron Beasley. Elijah Herring's really stepped up this season. We'll see what, Kamal Hayden's status is in the secondary, but they're just not going to be able to really throw the ball. I think this defensive line in front seven, Tyler Barron, Amari Thomas, some veteran defensive linemen, they're going to eat up in this game. And I'll take Tennessee to win this one. I think they looked really good last week. Second half certainly was disappointing, playing against an elite defense, probably the best in CFB. Kentucky kind of on a free fall here, though. I'll stick with the Vols.
I'm going to take Kentucky here. I think at home, I'm going to go with the home team. I know they're in a bit of a free fall, but Kentucky has been very good as an offense. At certain points, they looked not great against Missouri, but they looked good against Florida. They looked good to Vanderbilt. They beat Florida. They absolutely ran all over Florida. They're going to have to find similar success on the ground. Alabama was able to run the ball later in the game. They're able to start pick apart the run defense for Tennessee. I think Kentucky can find similar success on the ground. I like Kentucky to win this one outright. This is certainly a tough matchup. The Vols, they looked great in that first half, but they looked very bad in that second half. I think we're most likely going to get the second half Vols again, which is certainly disappointing if you're a Tennessee fan. I like Kentucky to win this game. I think they have a very good rushing attack. Davis, the running back, 781 and 8 scores for him. Devin Leary has not been fantastic, but he's been serviceable. 196 through the air, 155 on the ground. Tennessee's offense is fantastic. 438 total yards with their defense. has looked weak on certain occasions. They looked bad against Alabama in the second half, looked very bad against Florida. I think the recipe for success is similar to what Florida did for Kentucky. Can they replicate that and win at home? I think they certainly need to find a way to get the job done. Mark Stoops, they lose this game, certainly would be a disappointing 3-game stretch for him to lose 3 in a row and kind of free fall from that 5-0 start. I'd be concerned if I was a Kentucky fan. I like the Wildcats here, though, at home. I think they're going to find a good success on the ground, good balance attacking, and make Milton uncomfortable and force him into mistakes like we saw late in the game against Alabama. This Kentucky defense has an opportunity to shut him down early, in my opinion. I think they're a good unit that does not get much respect. They're only allowing 95 yards per game on the ground. They're solid against the run. I like Kentucky to win this one outright at home.
Looking at Wisconsin hosting Ohio State, 14.5-point line. Obviously, Tanner Mordecai still out. Braden Lockheed was able to put together a nice comeback against Illinois. Didn't play great, though. Back-to-back games, a 50% comp rate. They have 240 and 2 touchdowns. Ohio State's just completely dominated Wisconsin in the past. Braylon Allen, kind of the lone man now in the backfield, 100 yards per game, 8 touchdowns. They've certainly really struggled the past couple weeks, though, on the ground, playing Iowa and Illinois. 2 great defensive lines, and they're playing one that's probably even better, led by Tyleik Williams and JT Tuimoloau. Ohio State, they're just elite on defense so far this season. And then, their offense is starting to kick into high gear a little bit, led by Kyle McCord. Cade Stover's been good. And, of course, Maserati Marv. He's been terrific for them, really coming together. They're gelling well together. And the Badgers, their passing attack, regardless, even with Mordecai, they really weren't gelling all that well together. Talented unit. I think they have great potential at pass catcher. I'm going to go ahead and pick Buckeyes to win this game, maybe about 17 points or so. Obviously, we talked about how this game means a lot to Luke Fickell to potentially come in here and try to knock Ryan Day and his crew off, in efforts of potentially stealing that job. And his defense has been great the last couple of weeks. They only played Illinois, Iowa, and Rutgers, though. And the 2 games before, they gave up 400 plus each in those contests. They did have 5 or 6 interceptions against Georgia Southern. So they're still out here playing tough defense. But I think this is a far cry from what they've seen the last couple of weeks, Nick, and I'm not sure they're going to be prepared for it. Ricardo Hallman at corner has been great with his 4 picks. But this isn't the same Wisconsin defense as old. Linebackers, they've been good, but not as effective in now popping. CJ Gotez, Najee at inside linebacker has been really good. Daryl Peterson's been a pleasant surprise as well. This just doesn't seem like the same defense. And, I guess lack of opponent. And, Wes not really watching the Badgers this year because they do have 2 losses on their resume. Could be something to watch. But the offense overall for the Badgers hasn't been very good, even against some lower quality opponents. All 3 of them have really good defensive lines, though. And the Buckeyes have the same thing. So I think you're going to see much of the same here from the Badgers. Just won't see it on the scoreboard as they're going to struggle. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place here, but I think Ohio State, they're going to cover this spread on the line. But that Luke Fickell intrigue is still there.
I think this is certainly an interesting game. It's not interesting as we hyped up to be in the season, or earlier in the season as Wisconsin's dropped 2 games at this point. Ohio State, this is a big opportunity for them to go on the road and beat a tough Big Ten defense who've, like you said, they haven't played great teams, but they have looked good in those games that they have played. Ohio State did not look fantastic against Penn State. They really kind of struggled. Penn State also really bailed them out of some mistakes there that helped them win that game. I do like Ohio State to cover this one. I think they're trying to get into that groove. They really do need to find themselves in this groove later in the season. They got to be able to put together some big performances here early on. I think, they're getting closer to tougher time. They beat one good team in Penn State. They got to play Michigan soon, though. Although we don't really know what's going on in Michigan with the whole sign stealing fallout of that scandal. I like Ohio State to win this game, though. I think they're going to win probably by about 20 points. This offense is fantastic. Obviously, McCord looks dialed in. He has really been mistake-free for the most part. 1 interception for him, 2,000 yards passing, nearly 12 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison's been fantastic. Travion Henderson, if he's going to play, he's a very solid back for them who's been involved, just battling some injuries. 431 total yards of offense. This defense has given up 336 total yards of offense for Wisconsin, so I like Ohio State to win this one and shut down this Wisconsin offense. I think the Buckeyes will go on the road and win this. They kind of hit that groove and move towards the playoffs, getting close to that conversation. They know what they got to do. They just got to continue to win games. They got this matchup, and they got Michigan looming on the horizons. So big opportunities for the Buckeyes coming forward.
Now looking at Colorado-UCLA in prime time, ABC. Bruins open at 14, now up to 17. We'll keep this one quick. They're going to win this game by 30 points. This is an awful matchup for Colorado. It's not a good football team. Offensive line's been incredibly poor. UCLA, one of the nation's best D lines, led Bilatu, Batu, Gabriel Grayson Murphy are great. Carl Jones, a veteran. This is a really good defensive line from UCLA. The running game as well, playing against a poor ground game. Carson Steele, TJ Harden, these guys have started to really come into their own in the backfield, over 215 yards per game as a team. Ethan Garbers looks like he's going to be the quarterback moving forward. Had a very good game against Stanford. Didn't play the 2 before then. So we'll see what happens with this quarterback battle, but he was really efficient in that contest. against Stanford. This Colorado's not a good football team, and I think they kind of proved that against Stanford, blowing that loss. That's certainly demoralizing. Tough schedule going ahead. Got to go to UCLA. I think some of that loudmouth attitude is probably certainly kind of to the wayside, which is certainly going to benefit Colorado. But, I mean, reality's setting in. This is a team that doesn't have great talent. Shadur Sanders and his pass catchers, that's about it. And then Travis Hunter, he's still a great player. Even showed it at wide receiver coming back from that injury, but he was not good in coverage. In UCLA, J. Michael Sturvant, more of a veteran, polished pass catcher. Logan Loya, some of these guys can certainly expose you on the outside. So looking to see Hunter have a bounce-back game. But so far, Colorado, this is a game where they really got smacked in the mouth against Stanford. A big reality check there. Do you think they're going to get payback here against the Bruins?
I think UCLA is going to run all over Colorado here. Colorado, tough loss against Stanford the last game they played. Very embarrassing performance to lose in double overtime like that, blowing the lead that they blew. I think this is a pretty good UCLA team despite the 2 losses. They are ranked. They didn't look great in the Utah game when they lost. They did not look fantastic against Oregon State. This still is a good team, has a good offense. Dante Moore's a pretty good quarterback. Despite his flaws, his offense is solid through the air, 248 through the air. They're really solid on defense. 68 yards per game allowed on the ground against a Colorado team that cannot run the ball at all. They're averaging 86 yards per game on the ground. I mean, those are just not a good matchup for me. I think UCLA dominates. Colorado will be one-dimensional, forced to go through the air, where UCLA can find a way and make Shadur Sanders make mistakes. I think this is going to be a blowout for UCLA. I think this is a blowout written all over it. I like them with the 17 points here. I think Colorado just is not prime for this matchup, no pun intended. I think they're going to struggle in this battle late night prime time on the East Coast, that is. I just think this is a bad matchup all around. I think UCLA just has a better edge in the important areas. They're going to win this game.
Yeah, Dante Moore really struggled in his last 3 starts, so it does look like they went to garbage. Still having a quarterback battle here late October. Cincinnati traveling as +7 to Oklahoma State. Cowboys, they've really found something in Ollie Gordon the past couple weeks. 8-16, 8 touchdowns rushing. He's also been a big asset as a pass catcher, 180 and a score. Cincinnati 2-5. This is a team I expected to struggle in terms of putting it in the win column. This is certainly a team that can play with some heart, though. Deshaun Pace is great. Daniel Gretzky, Dante Corleone, Juwan Briggs. This is a really good defensive line for Cincinnati. They're going to be tasked with trying to slow down Gordon in that rushing attack. And, they've been really good this season. Last the entire year, really, they've allowed less than 125 yards in every single game this season. So this is a dynamic run defense. They're incredibly good there. So it's going to really be forcing Alan Bowman in his hands. Cincinnati, though, they've been really, lacking efficiency on offense, which I certainly expected. But they've been really good at times. Just the consistency's been bad. Emory Jones and Corey Kenner have been a nice duo on the ground. Jones through the air, though, 8 interceptions, 61%. Has been off from time to time. Xavier Henderson, though, he's been a big bailout player for them. So Cincinnati's made too many mistakes this year, and the defense, they are phenomenal on the ground, not as polished through the air, which you kind of expected a regression there. I did expect this run defense to be good, but they've been flat out elite this year, Nick. So this will be a fun matchup, and that's why we're talking about the game. Oklahoma State, they could certainly give up a lot through the air. 410 against Kansas. 250 against West Virginia. The defense is certainly a bit of an issue. They still have good ball players like Colin Oliver. Nicholas Martin's been good. Anthony Goodlow. So I'm going to pick Oklahoma State to win this game. And I guess I'll pick them to cover as well. I just think they're too hot right now. Cincinnati, I think they certainly have matchups they can exploit them. And if they can slow down Ollie Gordon, they'll have a great shot at winning this one.
I think Cincinnati and Oklahoma State, this is a very interesting matchup. I do like this potential matchup battle here early on in the Big 12, late kind of getting towards the season here. Cincinnati struggled. They've lost 5 in a row. Not great for them. They have a very good run defense, 100 yards allowed per game. Oklahoma State's not looked great on the ground, 165. Cincinnati's offense, 444 per game, is pretty solid. They do have nice balance. I think it's going to be a close game, but I do like Oklahoma State to win this one at home. They've won 3 in a row and finally seem to get that groove back in them. They really struggled against South Alabama and Iowa State, but they've got this groove again. They look comfortable. They look like they're ready to continue to kick on this season and push towards bowl eligibility. I do like what they've done so far this season. They're getting better slowly over time. The offense is getting better. They're clicking 238 through the air. The running attack is getting slowly better. It's not great, but it's getting better. The defense could certainly use some room. So I think this will be a shootout. The over is certainly in play at 54.5, but I do like Oklahoma State to cover this one late in the game and get a nice win for Mike Gundy and co. to try to push and try to get towards a mid-tier, higher-tier bowl game in the Big 12.
And Bedlam is looming 2 weeks away at home there for the Pokes. And Cincinnati's also had a turnover at least in every single game this year, especially in conference play. They've really struggled in terms of giveaways, so that's something to monitor there. Nice little Week 9 slate on tap. no one's ever safe in college football, so we're going to see plenty of chaos with, the final few weeks looming in our regular season. It's going to be a massive one. Little primer here, Nick. Not too bad what we got going.
Exciting matchup. There's some other good games. Air Force plays a fun game at Colorado State. That should be an interesting matchup as well. Some other good ranked teams. Good week. Like you said, a primer for week 10 should be a really exciting matchup week.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.
Fucking hell, my throat hurts. What's today's date? 10/23. 5 hours.